I'm Abigail Mitchell, 35, and I built my medical clinic from nothing but determination and student loan debt. Family is supposed to be your support system, not your burden. Yet here I am, defending the fruits of my labor from the very people who never believed in me. It's funny how relatives who couldn't be bothered to help during the struggle suddenly appear when success arrives, hands outstretched, expecting their share. Before I tell you how my own blood tried to claim what I built with my sweat and tears, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to protect what's rightfully yours. Growing up in Millfield, Ohio, a town where ambition often went to die, I was the odd one out in my family. My parents, Robert and Karen Mitchell, weren't terrible people, but they were firmly planted in practicality. Keep your feet on the ground, my father would say whenever I mentioned my dream of becoming a doctor. It wasn't that they didn't want me to succeed, they just didn't believe I could. My older brother Jason was always the golden child despite his pattern of starting things and never finishing them. Football, college, jobs, he'd begin with enthusiasm and quit when things got tough. Yet somehow, my parents always found a way to justify his choices. Jason's finding himself, they'd say. Meanwhile, my younger sister Emma followed the expected path: community college, accounting degree, marriage by 24, earning constant praise for her sensible choices. When I announced at our kitchen table during my senior year of high school that I wanted to become a doctor, the reactions were telling. My mother looked concerned, my father frowned, Jason laughed, and Emma just looked confused. Medicine? That's 8 years of school plus residency, my father said, calculating the cost in his head. We can't afford that, and neither can you. I'll get scholarships, I insisted. I'll work. I'll take out loans if I have to. Those doctor dreams will saddle you with debt for life, my mother warned. Why not nursing? It's a good, stable career. But I didn't want good and stable. I wanted to be a physician, to make the kind of difference that required everything I had to give. Without family support, I charted my own course. I started at Millfield Community College, working mornings at a coffee shop and evenings at a senior care facility. For 2 years, I existed on 4 hours of sleep and pure determination. When my car broke down, I biked 5 miles to campus through Ohio winters. When I got sick, I studied through fevers. My family watched my struggle with detached concern, always ready with an "I told you so" when I looked particularly exhausted. The turning point came when I earned a partial scholarship to Ohio State University for my junior and senior years. I still needed loans and still worked part-time, but I was moving forward. During a rare family dinner visit home, I shared my excitement about my 3.95 GPA and research position. That's nice, my mother said distractedly before turning to Jason. Tell Abby about your new job at the insurance company. Jason, between careers again, had landed an entry-level position. The dinner conversation revolved around his foot in the door and potential for advancement, while my achievements barely registered. When medical school application time arrived, I applied to 17 schools, casting a wide net. The rejections came first, 12 of them. Each one felt like a personal failure, a confirmation of my family's doubts. I didn't tell them about the rejections, but during a phone call home, my father asked casually, "So, heard back from any of those medical schools yet?" "Still waiting," I said, swallowing the sting of another rejection that had arrived that morning. "Well, there's no shame in changing direction," he offered, his tone suggesting he expected exactly that outcome. 3 waitlists followed, and finally, 2 acceptances. I chose Ohio State Medical College, partly for the in-state tuition, but mostly because I'd need to take out substantial loans. When I called home with the news, my mother's first question was, "How much will that cost?" Not congratulations. Not pride. Just concern about money. "I got a partial scholarship," I said. "I'll need about $160,000 in loans for the 4 years. The sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line said everything. "Abigail," my father took the phone, "that's a mortgage on a house you don't own. Be reasonable. There are other careers that don't require financially crippling yourself." I tried to explain the return on investment, my career plans, the loan forgiveness programs available if I worked in underserved areas, which I intended to do. But their minds were made up. This was a mistake, and they wouldn't support it. "You chose this path" became their refrain whenever I mentioned struggles during medical school. When I couldn't come home for Christmas first year because I couldn't afford the plane ticket, my mother said those exact words, adding, "We told you how hard this would be." Medical school was the intellectual challenge I'd anticipated, but the emotional isolation was unexpected. While my classmates received care packages and supportive calls from family, I learned to be self-sufficient. I found small ways to save money living with 3 roommates in a cramped apartment, cutting my own hair, eating the free food offered at campus events. During my second year, I met Dr. Eleanor Winters, a professor of community medicine who would change the trajectory of my life. After I stayed after her lecture to ask questions about healthcare disparities, she invited me to assist with her research on accessible care models. "You think differently, Abigail," she told me one evening as we worked late in her office. "You see problems as opportunities rather than obstacles." When I confided my family's lack of support, her response was refreshingly direct. "Sometimes the people who should believe in us the most are incapable of it," she said. "That doesn't reflect your worth. It reflects their limitations. You're going to be an exceptional physician with or without their blessing." Those words became my mantra during the grueling years of medical school. Dr. Winters became the mentor I desperately needed, guiding me through research opportunities, introducing me to her network, and sometimes just listening when the pressure became overwhelming. By graduation day, I'd done it. Despite every doubt, every financial struggle, every moment of near collapse from exhaustion, I was now Abigail Mitchell, MD. My family did attend the ceremony, a surprise I hadn't expected. They sat stiffly in their folding chairs as I crossed the stage, looking somewhat out of place among the emotional families around them. At the small reception afterward, my father awkwardly patted my shoulder. "Well, you proved us wrong. Congratulations." Before I could absorb what might have been his first acknowledgement of my determination, he added, "Now comes the hard part, paying back all those loans. Should only take you, 20 years?" My mother hugged me briefly, whispering, "I hope it's worth it," in my ear. Jason shook my hand formally, as if we were business acquaintances. "Dr. Little Sister." Who would have thought? Only Emma seemed genuinely happy for me, though even she couldn't resist adding, "Maybe now you can finally settle down." As they drove away, leaving me standing outside the medical school building where I'd spent 4 transformative years, I realized something important. I had done this alone, and there was a certain power in that knowledge. Their doubt hadn't stopped me. If anything, it had fueled me. Little did I know then that the hardest challenges and the most painful family dynamics were still ahead. Residency hit like a tidal wave. I matched at University Hospital in Cleveland, and suddenly my life consisted of 80-hour work weeks, 30-hour shifts, and moments of both indescribable triumph and devastating loss. The learning curve was vertical, but I climbed it one grueling day at a time. During my second year of residency, I met Rachel Bennett, a fellow resident who approached medicine with the same passion I did. We bonded over midnight cafeteria meals and post-shift debriefs in the parking lot. Rachel came from a medical family, her mother a surgeon, her father a cardiologist, who had fully supported her journey. At first, I envied the ease with which she spoke about her family, the care packages they sent, the advice they offered. But Rachel never made me feel lesser for doing it alone. "Different paths, same destination," she would say with a shrug. As we rotated through various departments, something became increasingly clear to both of us. The healthcare system was failing certain communities. During our family medicine rotation in a low-income neighborhood clinic, we witnessed people waiting hours for basic care, patients rationing medications because they couldn't afford refills, and preventable conditions becoming emergencies due to lack of access. "This is wrong," Rachel said one night as we drove home after a particularly difficult shift where a young mother had arrived with pneumonia that had progressed to sepsis because she couldn't afford to miss work for a doctor's appointment. "We have to do better than this." The seed was planted that night, a vision of a different kind of practice, one that prioritized accessibility, prevention, and community needs. "What if we opened our own clinic?" I suggested, half joking, as we sat in Rachel's car outside my apartment building. Design it from the ground up to address these gaps. Rachel didn't laugh. Instead, she turned to me with intense seriousness. We should. We absolutely should. For the remainder of our residency, between patient care and endless studying, we built our dream on paper. Evenings off were spent researching business models, healthcare regulations, and community needs. We studied successful practices and failed ones, trying to identify what made the difference. Dr. Winters, still my mentor, connected us with physicians who had established independent practices, and we soaked up their wisdom like sponges. In our final year of residency, our dream began shifting from theoretical to possible. We identified an underserved area on the edge of Cleveland's East Side, a neighborhood in transition with a mix of working-class families, elderly residents, and young professionals. The existing healthcare options were limited to an overcrowded county clinic and a corporate urgent care with revolving door providers. With 3 months left in residency, we created a formal business plan. We would need approximately $450,000 to purchase and renovate a building, buy equipment, hire initial staff, and cover operating costs until we became profitable. The financial projections were sobering but not impossible. Armed with our detailed plan, exceptional medical credentials, and boundless determination, we approached banks. The rejections came swiftly. "You have no business experience," one loan officer explained kindly. "Your student loan debt creates an unfavorable debt-to-income ratio," said another. "The location is too risky," a third pronounced without even visiting the neighborhood. After the 5th rejection, Rachel's confidence wavered. "Maybe we need to work for a hospital system for a few years, save up some capital." But I couldn't shake the vision we'd created. "If we wait, we'll get comfortable. We'll adapt to the very system we want to change." I made a decision that terrified me. I would mortgage my small one-bedroom apartment, which I'd purchased cheaply during a market downturn. It would only provide about $120,000, far short of what we needed, but a start. With my entire financial future on the line, I swallowed my pride and called my parents. Maybe seeing our detailed plan, understanding our vision, would finally earn their support. I asked if they would consider either investing a small amount or, at minimum, co-signing a business loan. The conversation still echoes in my mind years later. "Abigail," my father said with exasperation, "haven't you taken enough financial risks? Doctors work for hospitals, they don't own them." "Dad, we've done the research. There's a real need. There's a reason those corporate medical groups dominate now," he interrupted. "The days of independent physicians are over. You're chasing a fantasy." My mother got on the extension. "Sweetie, you already have so much debt. Get established first, build some security." I tried explaining our vision, the community focus, the sliding scale payments, the flexible hours to accommodate working patients. They couldn't see it. "And what about starting a family?" my mother added. "You're already 30. This clinic idea would take all your time." I hung up feeling defeated but not surprised. Once again, I was on my own. Rachel, however, had better luck. Her parents couldn't provide major funding, but they offered $75,000 from their retirement savings and agreed to co-sign a smaller business loan. "They believe in us," she said simply. That vote of confidence renewed my determination. We adjusted our plan, found a smaller building, a former dental office that had been vacant for 2 years, and negotiated a seller-financed arrangement for part of the purchase price. We cut every corner possible on personal expenses, worked locum tenens weekend shifts at rural hospitals for extra cash, and slowly pieced together our financing. The day we signed the purchase agreement for the building was surreal. The dated 1970s structure with its faded wallpaper and outdated wiring didn't look like much, but to us, it was everything, the physical foundation of our dream. As we stood in what would become our main reception area, Rachel snapped a photo of me holding the keys. "Send that to your family," she suggested. I shook my head. "They wouldn't understand." "Their loss," Rachel said firmly. "Because this is just the beginning of something amazing." Looking around at the dusty waiting room with its worn carpet and water-stained ceiling tiles, I allowed myself to feel something I'd been holding at bay: pride. This was mine. Ours. And we had done it without the support system most people take for granted. The building wasn't much yet, but it was a promise to ourselves and to the community we intended to serve. Mitchell and Bennett Family Medicine was about to become reality, and against all odds, I had laid its foundation stone by stone alone. The renovation process tested every ounce of our determination. Rachel and I kept our full-time hospital jobs while dedicating every spare minute to transforming our dilapidated building into a functioning medical clinic. Our meager budget meant doing as much work ourselves as possible. YouTube became our renovation university. Weeknights and weekends disappeared into an endless cycle of demolition, cleaning, painting, and learning skills I never imagined would be part of my medical career. I became surprisingly proficient at patching drywall, while Rachel revealed an unexpected talent for electrical work. For years of medical school, 3 years of residency, and here I am scraping popcorn ceiling texture, I laughed one Saturday, perched precariously on a ladder, dust covering my hair and face. Think of it as surgical training, Rachel quipped from below, catching debris in a tarp. Precision and patience. The building fought us every step of the way. We discovered black mold behind the bathroom walls, outdated electrical wiring that wouldn't meet code, and plumbing issues that required extensive replumbing. Each unexpected problem ate into our budget and timeline. At one particularly low point, after learning the HVAC system needed complete replacement, a $17,000 expense we hadn't anticipated, I sat on the floor of what would eventually become an exam room and considered giving up. Maybe my father was right, I told Rachel when she found me there. Maybe independent clinics are a thing of the past. Rachel sat beside me, equally exhausted. Do you still believe people in this neighborhood deserve better health care? Of course I do. Then we keep going. She bumped my shoulder with hers. Besides, I already ordered the sign. No refunds. The regulatory process proved even more challenging than the physical renovation. We navigated a labyrinth of permits, inspections, healthcare regulations, insurance credentialing, and licensing requirements. Each government office seemed to operate in isolation from the others, creating a bureaucratic catch-22 where we needed approval A to get approval B, but couldn't get approval B without first having approval A. It's almost like they don't want small practices to succeed, I observed bitterly after spending 3 hours at the city building department, only to be told we needed yet another form from yet another office that was already closed for the day. Rachel, ever the optimist, found solutions where I saw only obstacles. When the cost of a required fire suppression system threatened to deplete our remaining funds, she discovered a city grant program for small businesses in our zip code. When our application for Medicare certification stalled in administrative limbo, she leveraged a connection through her parents to identify exactly who could help unstick the process. While I handled most of the clinical setup, ordering equipment and supplies, Rachel focused on the business infrastructure, setting up electronic health records, negotiating with insurance companies, and establishing billing systems. We complemented each other perfectly, filling in each other's knowledge gaps and bolstering each other through moments of doubt. 6 months into renovations, we hired our first 2 employees, Nancy, an experienced nurse who had grown disenchanted with the assembly line approach of her hospital job, and Maria, a bilingual receptionist who lived in the neighborhood and understood the community's needs firsthand. Both took a chance on us, accepting positions at a clinic that still had plastic sheeting over doorways and boxes of supplies stacked in corners. I believe in what you're building here, Nancy told us after her interview. Healthcare that actually cares. The day the sign installation crew arrived was momentous. We all stood on the sidewalk watching as Mitchell and Bennett Family Medicine was secured to the freshly painted facade. The late afternoon sun caught the lettering, making it gleam against the brick building. "It's really happening," I whispered, almost afraid to say it too loudly. Maria took a photo of Rachel and me standing beneath our names, arms around each other's shoulders, exhausted but triumphant smiles on our faces. I posted it on my rarely used social media accounts with the simple caption, "Dreams under construction." My phone remained silent. No congratulatory calls from family, no supportive comments, no acknowledgement of this milestone. The absence shouldn't have hurt after all this time, but it did a small, persistent ache beneath the excitement. Opening day arrived with both fanfare and terror. We distributed flyers throughout the neighborhood, placed small ads in local publications, and relied heavily on word of mouth through community organizations we'd connected with. But would anyone come? At 8:55 a.m., 5 minutes before our official opening, I peeked through the front blinds to see a small group already waiting on the sidewalk. An elderly couple, a mother with 2 young children, a middle-aged man checking his watch. People who needed care. People who were choosing us. Ready? Rachel asked, straightening her white coat. I nodded, though my heart hammered against my ribs. We were no longer residents under supervision. This clinic, these patients, they were our responsibility now. Maria unlocked the door exactly at 9 a.m., and our first patient stepped into Mitchell and Bennett Family Medicine. Mrs. Gladys Henderson, 72, with arthritis and hypertension, became the first name in our patient registry. Welcome, I said, extending my hand. I'm Dr. Mitchell. About time we got some good doctors in this neighborhood, she replied, her firm handshake belying her age. My last physician retired 2 years ago, and I've been using the emergency room since then. That first day we saw 12 patients. Not the 20 we had capacity for, but 12 people who needed care, who shared their stories and bodies with us, who trusted these 2 young doctors in their brand new clinic. By the end of the week, we had 38 patients in our system. By the end of the month, over 100. The first year passed in a blur of 18-hour days and 7-day weeks. Rachel and I took minimal salaries, pouring every spare dollar back into the clinic. We added services based on community needs, evening hours for working patients, a monthly specialist clinic where colleagues from our residency donated time, vaccination drives, and health education workshops. Every examination room was equipped with translation services for our diverse patient population. There were moments of near financial disaster. Insurance companies delayed payments, unexpected expenses arose, and the tight margin we operated on grew even tighter. There were nights I lay awake calculating and recalculating numbers, wondering if we would make payroll. But there were triumphs too. The diabetic patient whose A1C improved dramatically after we helped him access affordable medications and connected him with a nutritionist. The anxious teen who finally found a safe space to discuss her mental health. The elderly man who brought us homemade bread every month in thanks for the home visit that had identified his medication error. On our first anniversary, we closed the clinic early and held a small celebration. Nancy brought cupcakes, Maria decorated the waiting room with balloons, and our now staff of 7 raised plastic champagne flutes in a toast. To Mitchell and Bennett, Nancy said, who created not just a clinic but a community. I'd send invitations to my family for the celebration. None responded. None came. I pretended it didn't matter, but Rachel knew better. She found me in my office afterward, staring at my phone. They'll realize what you've built eventually, she said gently. I put my phone away. It doesn't matter. Look around us. We have everything we need right here. And in that moment, surrounded by the team we'd assembled and the clinic we'd built from nothing, I almost believed it. 3 years passed with Mitchell and Bennett Family Medicine, not just surviving but thriving. We expanded into the vacant building next door, knocking through walls to create a larger waiting area, adding 4 new examination rooms, and establishing a small procedure suite for minor surgeries and treatments that previously required hospital referrals. Our staff grew to 15, including 3 additional physicians who shared our vision of accessible, community-focused healthcare. Dr. James Chin specialized in geriatrics, addressing the needs of our aging population. Dr. Maya Patel brought expertise in women's health and obstetrics, allowing us to provide prenatal care. Dr. Thomas Washington, a recent graduate who reminded me of myself a few years earlier, chose our clinic over more lucrative offers because, as he put it, I want to practice real medicine, not assembly line healthcare. Our patient roster expanded to over 3,000, with a reputation that drew people from beyond our immediate neighborhood. We maintained our commitment to sliding scale payments and flexible scheduling, never turning away patients based on insurance status or ability to pay. The financial struggles of our early days gradually eased. We paid off our initial loans ahead of schedule and reinvested in technology that improved patient care, a digital radiography system, updated diagnostic equipment, and enhanced telehealth capabilities that connected our patients with specialists when needed. Our innovative approach to community healthcare began drawing attention. The Cleveland Medical Journal published a feature on our practice model, highlighting our integration of social services, mental health support, and medical care under one roof. They called our approach a blueprint for addressing healthcare disparities in urban settings. Following that article, invitations began arriving for Rachel and me to speak at medical conferences and healthcare symposiums. We took turns, ensuring the clinic was always covered, sharing our experiences and the lessons we'd learned in building an independent practice focused on community needs. The secret, I told a packed auditorium at the National Primary Care Conference, is listening to your patients. They know what barriers they face. Our job is to help dismantle those barriers, not add to them with rigid systems and inflexible approaches. Local recognition followed. The Cleveland Chamber of Commerce awarded us Small Business of the Year, acknowledging both our healthcare contributions and our economic impact on a previously underserved area. The Neighborhood Council presented us with a Community Service Award, with longtime patients providing testimonials about the difference our clinic had made in their lives. Before Doctors Mitchell and Bennett opened their doors, one elderly patient told the gathered crowd, "I was taking the bus 3 hours each way to see a doctor who had 7 minutes for me. Now I walk 2 blocks to see physicians who know my name, remember my grandchildren, and take time to make sure I understand my health." Each acknowledgement felt like validation of our vision, proof that our struggle had been worthwhile. I kept a small album of photos and news clippings in my desk drawer, tangible evidence of what we'd built against all odds. Sometimes, on particularly challenging days, I would flip through it, reminding myself of how far we'd come. Our social media presence grew organically as patients shared their experiences. We used the platforms to provide health education, announce free screening days, and connect with the community. Rachel, more comfortable with technology than I was, started a weekly health tip video series that gained unexpected popularity. "You're becoming a local celebrity," I teased after overhearing patients in the waiting room discussing her latest video on managing seasonal allergies. "Just using every tool we have to reach people," she replied, though I could tell she enjoyed the positive feedback. The broader medical community, initially skeptical of our independent model, began to take notice. Larger healthcare systems sent representatives to observe our operations, curious about how a small clinic managed to achieve better patient outcomes and satisfaction scores than their multi-million-dollar facilities. "They're missing the point," Rachel observed after one such visit. "They think it's about our systems or technology. It's really about relationships and trust." Our greatest professional triumph came when the Journal of the American Medical Association published our research article on community-based preventive care. Using anonymized data from our patient population, we demonstrated how our approach had reduced emergency department visits by 34% and improved chronic disease management metrics significantly above national averages. The day after publication, we received an invitation to present our findings at the annual National Healthcare Innovation Summit, a platform usually reserved for academic medical centers and healthcare corporations. Rachel and I would be the first independent practice physicians featured in the conference's 10-year history. The evening before we were scheduled to fly to Chicago for the summit, a local television station arrived at the clinic to interview us about the recognition. The reporter, a woman who had covered healthcare issues in Cleveland for years, seemed genuinely impressed by what we'd created. "What made you choose this path instead of joining an established medical group?" she asked as cameras rolled in our waiting room after hours. I thought about my answer carefully. We saw a need that wasn't being met, and we believed there was a better way to provide care. Sometimes you have to build what you can't find. The segment aired on the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news, with the anchor introducing us as local physicians making a national impact with their innovative approach to community healthcare. That night, as I packed for the Chicago trip, my phone buzzed with a text message. I expected it to be Rachel with a last-minute packing reminder or perhaps one of our staff congratulating us on the TV appearance. Instead, the name that appeared on my screen sent a jolt of surprise through me. Jason Mitchell. My brother. After years of silence, after missing every milestone of my clinic's development, he was suddenly reaching out. His message was casual, as if we'd spoken recently. Hey sis, saw you on the news tonight. How are things going with that clinic of yours? I stared at the phone, unsure how to respond. After all this time, after all the silence, now he was interested? I typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on a simple, "Things are going well, thanks. About to head to Chicago for a conference." His reply came quickly, "That's great. We should catch up when you're back. Lots to talk about." Lots to talk about. After years of nothing. I set the phone down, a strange uneasiness settling over me. Why no? What had changed? I didn't yet recognize it as the first ripple of a coming storm, the first sign that my family, so conspicuously absent during our years of struggle, was suddenly taking notice now that success had arrived. The Chicago conference was a triumph. Rachel and I presented to a packed auditorium, received a standing ovation, and made connections with healthcare innovators from across the country. We returned to Cleveland energized and full of new ideas for the clinic's future. I had almost forgotten about Jason's text until the day after our return, when the clinic receptionist called my office. "Dr. Mitchell, there are some people here to see you. They say they're your parents." The surprise must have shown on my face as I walked into the waiting room. There stood Robert and Karen Mitchell, looking somewhat out of place among our patients. My father wore a button-down shirt and khakis, his version of formal attire, while my mother clutched her purse with both hands, her eyes darting around the space. "Mom? Dad? Is everything okay?" I asked, immediately concerned that some family emergency had prompted this unprecedented visit. "Can't parents visit their successful daughter?" my father replied with a forced heartiness that didn't match our history. "We saw you on the news. Thought it was time we came to see this place for ourselves." I led them on a tour of the clinic, introducing them to staff members who regarded my parents with curious looks. They'd never seen any of my family before. Nancy, who knew pieces of my background, raised an eyebrow at me over my mother's head, a silent question I answered with the slightest head shake. My parents expressed appropriate amazement at each stop on the tour. The electronic health record system, the procedure rooms, the community education space we'd recently added. "This is really something, Abigail," my father said, his voice containing an unfamiliar note of respect. "You've built quite an operation here." Rachel and I both did, I corrected gently, uncomfortable with this singular credit. Of course, he agreed quickly. "But it has your name first on the sign." After the tour, I brought them to my office, still trying to understand the purpose of this sudden appearance. "We're proud of you," my mother said, sitting primly on the edge of a chair. "We always knew you were determined, but this," she gestured vaguely around us, "this is impressive." The words I'd longed to hear for years now rang hollow, coming after the fact, after the success was undeniable, after others had recognized and validated our work. "Thank you," I said simply, not trusting myself with more words. My father cleared his throat. "You know, Abigail, there's something to be said for family businesses. Keeping success in the family, building a legacy." I felt a flicker of unease. "This isn't exactly a family business, Dad. Rachel and I built this ourselves." "But it could be," he continued, leaning forward. "With your expertise and our business sense, who knows how far this could go." Before I could respond to this bewildering statement, my mother jumped in. "Have you thought about expansion? Multiple locations? Your father has been reading about medical practice management. Fascinating field." The conversation continued in this vein, with subtle suggestions about family collaboration and combining talents. I answered vaguely, increasingly uncomfortable with the direction, but unable to believe they were actually suggesting what it seemed they were suggesting. They left with promises to continue the conversation soon, my father pumping my hand in a firm handshake that felt more businesslike than paternal. Rachel found me in my office afterward, staring at the wall. "Family reunion?" she asked carefully. "Something like that," I replied. They saw the news segment. Suddenly, they're interested in family businesses and legacies. She sat across from me, concern evident in her expression. What exactly does that mean? I'm not entirely sure, I admitted. But I have a feeling we're about to find out. 2 days later, Jason appeared at the clinic during lunch hour. Unlike my parents, he didn't call ahead. He simply walked in, told the receptionist he was my brother, and asked to see me. He looked different than I remembered, more polished in a way that seemed artificial, his casual but expensive clothing and styled hair at odds with the brother I'd known. "Look at you, Dr. Mitchell," he said, arms spread wide as he entered my office. The big success story of the family. We made awkward small talk about his life, divorced 6 months ago, between jobs again, but exploring opportunities. He asked superficial questions about the clinic, his eyes continuously scanning my office as if appraising its contents. "You know," he said eventually, leaning back in his chair, "I've been thinking about getting into healthcare administration. Seems like a growing field with good prospects." "It can be," I answered cautiously. "It usually requires specific education and experience, though." He waved away this detail. "I've always been a quick study. And family connections never hurt, right?" His laugh was too loud for the small space. "Speaking of which, I ran into Brad Wilson last week. Remember him from high school? His brother-in-law works for that medical journal that published your article." Small world. The name-dropping continued, along with hints about his business development skills and how he was ready for a new challenge. By the time he left, the implication was clear. Jason saw my clinic as a potential solution to his employment situation. The pattern continued over the next 2 weeks. My sister Emma, who lived 2 hours away and whom I'd barely spoken with in years, called to reconnect. Our conversation was pleasant but punctuated with mentions of how she'd always admired my entrepreneurial spirit and how her town really needed better medical care options. My parents invited me to dinner at an expensive restaurant I knew they couldn't comfortably afford. Throughout the meal, my father spoke about retirement planning and leaving something for the next generation, while my mother reminisced about how they had always supported my independence. It was during dessert that my father finally arrived at his point. "Your mother and I have been discussing your clinic, Abigail. We think it's time to formalize the family's involvement." I set down my fork. "I don't understand what you mean." "Well," he continued, pulling a folder from his jacket pocket, "we've drafted a proposal for transitioning Mitchell and Bennett Family Medicine into a true family enterprise." He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a typed document titled Mitchell Family Medical Center, Organizational Structure. The contents froze the blood in my veins. The proposal outlined a complete restructuring of our clinic. Jason would serve as Chief Operating Officer, with a salary that made my eyes widen. Emma would manage a new satellite location in her town. My father would oversee strategic planning and financial operations. Even my mother had been assigned a role in patient relations. The document included a timeline for renaming the clinic, removing Bennett entirely, and a compensation structure that would significantly reduce Rachel's and my authority and financial stake. The justification section cited family expertise and natural expansion of the family legacy. "This isn't possible," I said finally, closing the folder. "Rachel is my equal partner. The clinic is established as it is. And none of you have medical or healthcare backgrounds." "That's why it works so perfectly," my father countered, as if I'd missed an obvious point. "You handle the medical side, we handle everything else. It frees you up to be a doctor." "I'm already a doctor. And a business owner. Rachel and I manage everything together." My mother reached across the table to pat my hand. "Sweetie, you're stretched so thin. Family support would make such a difference." "Family support?" I repeated, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Where was that support when I was working 3 jobs to get through college? Or when I was drowning in medical school debt? Or when Rachel and I were scraping mold off clinic walls because we couldn't afford contractors? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "That's water under the bridge," my father said dismissively. "We're here now, ready to take some of the burden off your shoulders." I looked between them, suddenly seeing the situation with perfect clarity. "You're not offering support. You're asking for jobs." Executive-level positions with executive-level salaries in a business you had no part in building. My mother's expression hardened. Family helps family, Abigail. It's what we do. Since when? I asked quietly. The conversation deteriorated from there. I refused to consider the proposal without Rachel's involvement. They insisted this was family business that should be decided before involving outsiders. When I pointed out that Rachel was hardly an outsider after all we'd built together, my father suggested that perhaps it was time to buy her out so the clinic could stay in the family. I left the restaurant shaken, the folder untouched on the table. On the drive home, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from both parents, alternating between apologies for the misunderstanding and assurances that we could work out the details to everyone's satisfaction. Rachel listened in stunned silence the next morning as I recounted the dinner and the proposal. When I finished, she sat back in her chair, arms crossed. "They can't be serious," she said finally. "They're completely serious," I confirmed. "And I'm worried this is just the beginning." My concern proved prophetic. Over the next week, Rachel and I discovered that Jason had been introducing himself as management to pharmaceutical representatives who visited the clinic. Emma had inquired with our insurance provider about coverage requirements for a satellite location. My father had approached our accountant requesting access to the clinic's financial records as family of the owner. The final straw came when Nancy, our head nurse, asked me casually when the clinic name was changing because your brother mentioned it was happening next month. Rachel and I called an emergency meeting with our legal counsel, a healthcare attorney named Marcus, who had guided us through the clinic's establishment. "Unfortunately, this isn't as uncommon as you might think," he told us after hearing the situation. "Success attracts interest, and family dynamics can complicate business matters considerably." "What can we do?" Rachel asked. "Your partnership agreement and corporate structure are solid," he assured us. "They have no legal claim to the business. But family pressure can be its own kind of problem." As we left his office, Rachel touched my arm gently. "Abby, you know I'll support whatever you need to do here. If you want to bring your family in somehow, some legitimate role with appropriate qualifications, I understand family is complicated." I shook my head, a lump forming in my throat at her generosity. "They're not interested in appropriate roles. They want control and profit without the work or risk. That's not how we built this place, and it's not how I'll run it." That evening, I received a text from my father, "Your mother, and I would like to meet with you and Rachel tomorrow to discuss next steps. Jason has some excellent ideas for clinic expansion." I stared at the message, a strange mix of anger and sadness washing over me. After years of absence, they now presumed the right to schedule business meetings about my clinic's future. After years of doubt, they now wanted to direct my success. "Next steps," I murmured to my empty living room. The audacity was almost impressive. I typed a response, "I'll check our schedule and get back to you." Then I set down my phone and tried to prepare myself for the confrontation I could no longer avoid. The meeting was set for Friday evening after clinic hours. Rachel and I arranged for our attorney Marcus to be available by phone if needed. We prepared financial summaries, our partnership agreement, and clinic growth projections, not because we intended to negotiate, but because we wanted full command of the facts. My family arrived as a unit, parents, Jason, and Emma, who had apparently driven in for the occasion. They brought folders, notebooks, and surprisingly, a man I didn't recognize who was introduced as Vernon Ellis, family business consultant. "We thought it would be helpful to have an objective third party," my father explained, as if bringing a stranger to this discussion was perfectly reasonable. Rachel and I exchanged glances. This was more organized than I'd anticipated. We gathered in our conference room, the space suddenly feeling too small for the tension it contained. My father took charge immediately, distributing copies of an expanded version of his proposal. "We've refined our vision based on your feedback, Abigail," he said, using the tone he'd always employed when explaining something he considered beyond my comprehension. "This is a comprehensive transition plan that benefits everyone." The new document was professionally formatted, complete with an executive summary, organizational chart, and 5-year projection. It proposed renaming the clinic to Mitchell Family Medical Center, with Rachel's name removed entirely. Jason would assume the title of Chief Operating Officer with a salary that exceeded what Rachel and I currently paid ourselves. Emma would manage a new satellite location with similar compensation. My parents would serve as executive advisors with generous consulting fees and profit participation. Most alarmingly, the ownership structure would be revised to give my family members collectively controlling interest, reducing Rachel to a minority stakeholder and fundamentally altering the equal partnership we'd built. This is a starting point for negotiation, of course, Vernon added smoothly when I remained silent. The Mitchell family understands the value of compromise. Rachel spoke first, her voice calm but firm. This isn't a negotiation. We're not selling or restructuring our practice. My mother looked surprised. Rachel, dear, we're not suggesting anything that dramatic. We're simply formalizing the family's involvement in Abigail's business. It's our business, I corrected. Rachel and I built it together, equally. Of course, my father acknowledged dismissively. But blood is blood. Family has a special place. Jason leaned forward, attempting a conspiratorial tone. Abby, this is a win-win. You get experienced business management. From whom? I interrupted, unable to contain myself. You've never successfully run anything. His face flushed. I have extensive sales experience. I understand customer relations. Patients aren't customers, Rachel said quietly. And medical practices aren't sales organizations. Emma, who had been silent until now, interjected. This isn't just about positions or titles. It's about creating a family legacy. Expanding to my town would help so many people. Are you prepared to invest capital for that expansion? I asked directly. Take out personal loans? Work without salary until it's profitable. Her eyes widened. Well, no. That would be the clinic's investment, obviously. The clinic that Rachel and I built with our own money, sweat, and risk, I clarified. While none of you showed the slightest interest or support. That's unfair, Abigail, my father said sharply. We've always supported you. The dam broke. Years of silent hurt and resentment flooded forward. When? I demanded. When I needed cosigners for my business loan. When I worked through medical school without a single care package or phone call. When Rachel and I renovated the clinic ourselves because we couldn't afford contractors. My mother's expression hardened. We raised you. We put food on the table, clothes on your back. You don't think that counts as support? That's parenting, I replied. Basic parenting. It's not the same as supporting my dreams or choices. We were practical, my father insisted. Someone had to be. These medical dreams of yours, we thought you'd fail, frankly. Most people would have. His brutal honesty hung in the air between us. You thought I'd fail, I repeated slowly. So you decided not to help, ensuring the odds were stacked against me. And now that I've succeeded anyway, you want control and profit. Vernon cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should focus on the present opportunity rather than past. There is no opportunity here, Rachel interrupted firmly. Mitchell and Bennett Family Medicine isn't changing ownership, management, or name. Period. My father's expression darkened. I think you're forgetting something important, Abigail. Family contribution. What contribution? I asked incredulously. We raised you. Educated you. Formed you into the person capable of building this clinic. That's contribution. That's investment. His tone turned threatening. Courts have recognized family enterprise rights in similar situations. I felt as if I'd been slapped. Are you threatening to sue me? I'm suggesting you recognize your obligations, he replied. Your moral and potentially legal obligations. The conversation deteriorated rapidly after that. Jason accused me of always being selfish, while Emma tearfully claimed I was choosing business over blood. My mother vacillated between emotional appeals about family loyalty and thinly veiled threats about the community hearing how you treat your own parents. Throughout it all, Rachel remained my steadfast ally, calmly countering each illogical claim, firmly rejecting each unreasonable demand. When my father finally slammed his hand on the table and demanded we be reasonable, she simply stood up. This meeting is over, she announced. Abigail and I have patience to prepare for tomorrow. We'll need to continue this another time. There's nothing to continue, I added, finding my voice again. The answer is no. To all of it. As they gathered their materials in stony silence, my father delivered his parting shot. You'll be hearing from our attorney. Your clinic was built on family foundation, whether you acknowledge it or not. After they left, Rachel and I sat in stunned silence. I knew it would be bad, I finally said. I didn't expect legal threats. They have no case, Rachel assured me. But we should call Marcus immediately. The next morning, I arrived at the clinic to find several staff members clustered around Nancy's computer, expressions troubled. What's going on? I asked. Nancy hesitated. Your brother has been posting on social media about the clinic. On screen was Jason's professional networking profile, recently updated to list himself as incoming Chief Operations Officer at Mitchell Family Medical Center, formerly Mitchell and Bennett Family Medicine. He had posted a lengthy announcement about exciting family transitions and expanding the Mitchell healthcare legacy. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Check your email. Now. In my inbox was a message from a local business reporter, reaching out for comment on the Mitchell family's announcement about assuming management control of your clinic. Could we schedule a brief interview about the transition? Attached was a press release, an actual press release, that my father had sent to local media outlets announcing the Mitchell family's expanded role in the successful healthcare practice founded by daughter Abigail Mitchell, MD. The situation escalated with breathtaking speed. By afternoon, we received a letter from an attorney representing my family, claiming they had significant interests in the clinic based on family enterprise contribution and verbal understandings. It demanded we cease making any business decisions without family consultation and threatened injunctive relief if we refused. Marcus reviewed the letter and called it legal nonsense, but warned that even baseless litigation could be disruptive and expensive. Worse than the legal threat was the community confusion. Patients began calling, asking if the clinic was changing ownership or management. 2 pharmaceutical representatives arrived for a meeting they'd supposedly scheduled with Mr. Jason Mitchell, COO. A potential new physician we'd been recruiting called to withdraw her application, citing concerns about apparent management instability. Rachel discovered that my sister had been contacting our insurance providers, attempting to verify coverage for a new location. My father had approached our bank, introducing himself as my business advisor and requesting information about our accounts and loans. The final blow came when Rachel received a call from a concerned friend. I was at the Chamber of Commerce lunch yesterday, she reported. Your brother was there, introducing himself as the new clinic manager and handing out business cards with the clinic's logo. He told people the practice was transitioning to family management and that you two would be focusing exclusively on patient care going forward. That evening, Rachel and I sat in my living room, surrounded by printouts of social media posts, the legal letter, and emails from confused colleagues and patients. The clinic we'd built with such care was under siege not from outside competitors, but from my own family. I don't understand, Rachel said, her voice cracking with rare emotion. They can't possibly think this will work legally. What's the endgame? I stared at the documents, pieces falling into place. They don't need to win legally. They just need to create enough chaos and confusion that we give in rather than fight. They're trying to force us to negotiate by damaging what we've built. The realization settled heavily between us. My family was willing to harm the clinic, potentially affecting patient care and staff livelihoods, to gain what they wanted. What do we do? Rachel asked simply. I closed my eyes, the weight of the decision pressing on me. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about whether I would allow toxic family dynamics to destroy something good and valuable. It was about whether I would betray Rachel's trust and partnership to appease people who had never supported me. We fight, I said finally, opening my eyes. We protect what we built. That night, lying sleepless in bed, I confronted the painful truth I'd been avoiding. The people who should have loved me most were willing to damage me for their own gain. The family I'd longed for approval from for so many years would never truly celebrate my success. They would only try to claim it. Tears slid silently onto my pillow, Not for the current crisis, but for the childhood support I never had, for the parents who saw my dreams as foolish rather than brave, for the siblings who viewed my success as a resource to exploit rather than an achievement to celebrate. By morning, my grief had hardened into resolve. This clinic wasn't just a business, it was my life's work, a healing place for our community, and the embodiment of Rachel's and my shared vision. I would not allow it to be corrupted or controlled by people who didn't share our values or commitment. The battle lines were drawn. The most painful confrontation of my life had begun. The next morning, Rachel and I met with Marcus and his associate Patricia, an attorney specializing in family business disputes. The conference room at their law firm became our war room, where we planned our defense strategy. First, we document everything, Patricia advised, her demeanor calm but determined. Every false claim, every unauthorized contact, every misrepresentation. We need a clear record of their actions. We compiled a comprehensive timeline of events since my family's sudden reappearance in my life. Each social media post, each business card, each unauthorized contact with our partners and providers was cataloged with meticulous care. Next, we send a cease and desist letter, Marcus continued. It needs to be absolutely clear that they have no authority to speak for the clinic, no ownership interest, and no management role. Will that stop them? I asked, doubtful after witnessing their determination. It creates a legal boundary, Patricia explained. If they continue after receiving formal notice, their actions become clearly willful and potentially actionable. The letter was drafted, reviewed, and sent by courier that afternoon to each family member. It outlined in unambiguous terms that Mitchell and Bennett Family Medicine was a legally established partnership between Rachel and me exclusively, that no family member had any ownership interest or management authority, and that their continued misrepresentation would result in legal action. We also took immediate practical steps to protect the clinic. We implemented new security protocols requiring identification for all visitors. We changed passwords on all accounts and systems. We held an emergency staff meeting to clarify the situation and establish communication guidelines. We contacted our key vendors, insurance providers, and banking partners to flag any unauthorized inquiries. 3 days passed with no response from my family. I began to hope they had recognized the futility of their position and decided to retreat. Then my phone rang during a patient consultation. My nurse interrupted apologetically. My father was in the waiting room, demanding to see me immediately. I finished with my patient, took a deep breath, and went to the front. My father stood near the reception desk, his posture rigid with anger, a folder clutched in his hand. "We need to talk," he stated flatly. I led him to my office, keeping the door open. "I have patients scheduled, so please be brief." He slapped the cease and desist letter on my desk. "This is how you respond to your family? With legal threats." "That letter was in response to your legal threats," I reminded him calmly. "And your misrepresentation of your role here. We're trying to help you, Abigail. To be part of what you've built." His voice rose. "This is what families do. They support each other." "Support goes both ways, Dad. Where was yours when I needed it?" His expression hardened. "You've always been selfish. Always thought you were better than the rest of us with your doctor dreams. Now you've got what you wanted, and you can't even share a piece of it with the people who raised you." The accusation stung, but I held firm. This isn't about sharing. This is about you and Jason and Emma trying to take control of something you didn't build and don't understand. "We're your family," he insisted, as if the word itself was the only argument needed. "Yes, you are," I acknowledged. "But that doesn't entitle you to my business." He changed tactics, his voice lowering. "Your mother is heartbroken. She cries every night about how her daughter has turned against her own blood." The guilt tactic was familiar, but it no longer had power over me. "I'm sorry she's upset. But emotional manipulation won't change my decision." His face flushed with anger. "This clinic would fail anyway with your bleeding heart approach to medicine. You think sliding scale payments and community programs are sustainable? You need practical business minds." "We've been profitable for 3 years," I stated simply. "Our approach works because it serves our community's needs." "It works because you got lucky," he snapped. And luck runs out, Abigail. As he turned to leave, he delivered his parting shot. The community deserves to know what kind of person you really are. How you treat family. How you hoard success. The implied threat was clear. If they couldn't claim part of the clinic, they would try to damage its reputation. Over the next week, their tactics escalated. Jason wrote a lengthy social media post about being excluded from the family business by an ungrateful sister. My mother called several of our longtime patients whom she knew from community connections, expressing concern about the clinic's management. My father approached local business leaders with vague suggestions about troubling issues at our practice. Each attack was documented, added to our growing file of evidence. The emotional toll was tremendous. I fluctuated between rage, heartbreak, and exhaustion. Rachel shouldered more of the clinical work during this period, giving me space to deal with the personal and legal aspects of the conflict. You need to take care of yourself, she insisted one evening, finding me still at my desk long after closing. This is a marathon, not a sprint. The turning point came unexpectedly. Emma called me on a Sunday afternoon, her voice hesitant. Can we meet somewhere? Just us. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our towns. She arrived looking tired, her usual polished appearance somewhat diminished. I can't do this anymore, she said after we'd settled with our drinks. Dad and Jason are obsessed. It's all they talk about, strategies to pressure you, people to contact, ways to force you to be reasonable. Why are you telling me this? I asked cautiously. She sighed. Because it's wrong. I got caught up in it at first. The idea of managing a clinic sounded prestigious, a step up from my accounting job. But the way they're going about it. She shook her head. Mom called your patients. Your patients, Abby. That crossed a line for me. Emma provided screenshots of group texts between my family members, discussing various ways to undermine my authority and damage the clinic's reputation until I came to my senses. The evidence was damning and painful to read, but critically important for our legal protection. I'm sorry, she said quietly as I scrolled through the messages. I should have stood up sooner. With Emma's documentation added to our file, Marcus and Patricia advised that we had sufficient evidence to pursue legal action for defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, and harassment. Instead, they suggested a different approach, a final, formal meeting with all parties present, where we would present the evidence and offer a choice, cease all actions immediately or face litigation. The meeting was set for a Friday evening at Marcus's office. My parents and Jason arrived looking confident, probably expecting another round of demands and negotiation. Their expressions changed when they saw Emma sitting on our side of the conference table. Marcus led the meeting with professional detachment, methodically presenting the documentation of their actions, the false claims, the patient contacts, the attempts to access financial information, the defamatory statements. Emma's evidence was presented last, revealing the coordinated nature of their campaign. Based on this evidence, Marcus concluded, my clients have grounds for multiple legal claims that would likely succeed in court. However, they are offering an alternative. Patricia slid documents across the table, legal agreements stipulating that my family members would cease all claims to the clinic, all communication with staff, patients, or business partners, and all public statements about Mitchell and Bennett Family Medicine. In exchange, we would not pursue legal action for their past behavior. You have a choice, I said, finding my voice at last. Sign these agreements and end this now, or we'll see this through in court. Either way, you will never have a role in my clinic. The silence that followed was deafening. My father stared at me with a mixture of shock and fury. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, the victim to the end. Jason glared at Emma, his expression one of betrayal. You'd sue your own parents, my mother finally asked, her voice trembling. To protect what Rachel and I built? To protect our patients and staff? Yes, I answered simply. I never wanted this fight. You brought it to my door. After a tense 30 minutes of private consultation, they signed the agreements. As the papers were being notarized, my father looked at me with cold eyes. You're no longer part of this family, he stated flatly. The words hurt, even though I'd expected them. I will always be your daughter, I replied. But I won't be a resource to exploit. They left without another word, 3 signatures on legal documents, the only resolution to decades of complex family dynamics. The aftermath was both painful and liberating. There was grief in acknowledging that the supportive family I'd longed for would never exist. There was relief in finally setting boundaries that protected what mattered most. There was sadness in losing the possibility of reconciliation, but freedom in releasing the obligation to earn approval that would never come. Security measures remained in place at the clinic, but no further incidents occurred. My family honored the legal agreement, if not out of respect for me, then out of fear of consequences. In the months that followed, I threw myself into expanding our clinic's mission. We launched a scholarship fund for aspiring medical students from disadvantaged backgrounds, particularly those interested in community-focused care. We expanded our services to include more preventive health programs, addiction treatment support, and mental health resources. The clinic not only survived the crisis but thrived. Our patient roster continued to grow, our innovative care model gained wider recognition, and our staff expanded to meet community needs. 6 months after the confrontation, I received a letter from a 14-year-old girl named Destiny who had attended one of our health education programs at her school. "I want to be a doctor just like Dr. Mitchell," she wrote. "I never thought someone from my neighborhood could do that until I met you." I framed her letter and hung it in my office, a reminder of why we'd built the clinic and why protecting it had been worth the painful fight. The experience transformed my understanding of family. I realized that family isn't defined solely by blood, but by consistent support, shared values, and mutual respect. My chosen family, Rachel, our staff, mentors like Dr. Winters, even patients who had been with us from the beginning, had shown me more genuine care than those who claimed family rights without family responsibilities. 1 year after the confrontation, we celebrated the clinic's 5th anniversary with an open house for the community. The event was packed with patients, staff, local healthcare partners, and supporters. Rachel and I stood together, watching the room filled with people whose lives had been touched by what we'd built. "No regrets?" she asked quietly. "Not about the clinic," I replied. "Never about that." As I looked around at the vibrant community we'd created, the staff who shared our vision, the patients who trusted us with their care, the medical students who now rotated through our clinic to learn community medicine, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had built something meaningful and protected it with integrity. Later that evening, I met with a young medical student who had applied for our scholarship program. She reminded me of myself a decade earlier, determined, passionate, and facing significant obstacles on her path to becoming a physician. "Any advice?" she asked earnestly as we concluded our conversation. I considered the journey that had brought me to this moment, the struggles, the betrayals, the triumphs, and the lessons. "Build your dreams on foundations of integrity," I told her, "and don't let anyone tell you that you owe them the fruits of your labor. The people who truly deserve to share in your success are those who believed in you when you had nothing to offer but potential." As she left, clipboard of notes clutched to her chest and eyes bright with determination, I saw the continuation of a legacy, not a family name on a building, but a philosophy of service, integrity, and community care that would outlast any individual career. That, I realized, was the truest measure of success, not what you accumulate, but what you pass on. Not what you claim, but what you create. If you've ever had to stand your ground to protect something you've built, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. What boundaries have you had to set with loved ones to preserve your hard work? Hit that subscribe button if this resonated with you, and share this video with someone who might need encouragement to protect what they've built. Thank you for spending this time with me. Remember, your worth isn't determined by those who failed to see your potential, but by the positive impact you choose to make in the world. Until next time.